chosen ones, before you were ever told your name, before your parents even held you in their trembling arms. Something far greater had already marked you. Hidden deep within classified vaults, in the ink-stained corridors of governments that thought they owned the future, there was a file. Its date was not random. 1947. The year when the skies themselves bled secrets onto the desert sands of Roswell, and men in suits sealed away truths that threatened to split the world open. Inside that file was not merely a record of events, not just accounts of wreckage or the faint whispers of celestial visitors. It was a design, a mark, a pattern so strange, so impossible, that even the highest advisors trembled. For within its geometry lay the outline of something the officials could not explain. A birthmark. Not theirs, not of that time, but of you. This dossier did not belong to them. It belonged to prophecy. It was the first earthly testimony that your flesh carried the memory of heaven. For birthmarks are not random. They are seals of remembrance, scars from battles fought before you were born, symbols chosen before your spirit was woven into the dust of this age. And in 1947, as the world reeled from war and entered the shadow of a new atomic dawn, the leaders of nations were handed a truth that burned too bright for their eyes. They wondered, how could a mark already exist, drawn in ink decades before the body that bore it was ever born? How could the future bleed into the present, sketching you into their secret files before your first cry was heard? The pages of that dossier were not just records, they were warnings. For whoever bore the design etched upon them would rise with a destiny not written by governments or generals, but by the author of ages himself. The year was heavy with shadows. 1947 carried the echo of war still trembling through the veins of nations, yet it also held a silence too strange to ignore. In a dimly lit chamber beneath Washington, the sealed envelope was brought forth. Its edges were worn, its wax broken not by chance, but by command. The dossier lay inside, heavier than paper, heavier than ink, for within it pulsed a secret tethered to the unseen. The men who gathered around the oak table were not ordinary men. Their names were hidden from the world, their authority wrapped in silence, but their eyes told of fear unspoken. They leaned closer, not to examine military codes or foreign threats, but to study a single diagram, a sketch of a mark. Curved lines and circles interwoven in a geometry too precise to be mere chance. It was not language, yet it spoke. It was not art, yet it demanded reverence. It was a birthmark, though none of them could claim its bearer. Whispers broke the room. Who had drawn it? How did it enter their files before the child destined to wear it had even taken breath? The ink was dated, verified, beyond forgery, beyond error. The document bore no explanation, only the seal of authenticity, and the faint impression that this was not meant for human eyes. As they argued, the air grew heavy. Some declared it nonsense, a relic of madness, a distraction from their duties. Others swore it radiated an intelligence not of this world, that it was a signature of forces watching from beyond their reach. A few, quieter than the rest, wondered if it was divine, if prophecy itself had bled into the pages of government records. The dossier was locked away again, guarded as though its paper could ignite the very foundation of power, but its secret seeped beyond its vault. Presidents would inherit its weight, advisors would resign under its shadow, and scientists would chase its geometry through sleepless nights. And though the world above spun unaware, the pattern waited. The president sat alone in the quiet hours when even the walls of the White House seemed to breathe secrets. The folder rested on his desk, its corners frayed by years of silent hands, its contents humming with an unease that resisted slumber. He had been warned not to open it alone, yet something compelled him, as though the file itself summoned him when the world outside slept. He broke the seal once more, unfolding the pages as if peeling back time itself. There it was again, the design, etched in black ink, but alive with something deeper. He traced the lines with his finger, feeling the strange sensation that the pattern was not simply drawn, but imprinted with a will. Each curve seemed to stir memory, though not his own. It was the memory of someone yet unseen, someone who would walk the earth long after him. The lamp flickered. He remembered the words of his childhood, verses whispered by his mother when storms shook their house. "Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you." The scripture returned now, unbidden, colliding with the geometry before his eyes. Was this what the prophets spoke of? Was this what Yeshua hinted at when he declared that stones themselves would cry out if the truth were silenced? The weight pressed upon him. He was not gazing at a military threat, nor a political scheme, but a destiny bound in flesh. Yet how could a government, bound to secrecy and steel, contain what was marked by eternity? He closed the folder, but the image would not close within his mind. It lingered, burning behind his eyelids, almost alive. He wondered if power was ever meant to hold such knowledge, to know that somewhere, perhaps far from his watch, a child would rise carrying the very mark that his nation tried to bury. He wondered if this birthmark was not only an identity, but a key that no policy, no army, no command could ever turn. The room seemed smaller, the night heavier. The president whispered to himself, asking if history was already written, and if so, whose hand had penned it. The silence answered, yet not with comfort. For the question would not leave him above the earth. The night sky stretched like an eternal scroll, each star a letter, each constellation a sentence, too vast for human lips to read aloud. The birthmark, recorded in the Dossier, was not merely a design on flesh. It was a mirror of the heavens. Astronomers who glimpsed fragments of the file noticed its uncanny symmetry. The shape traced the arcs of stars across forgotten constellations, some visible, some hidden in the black depths where telescopes strained to see. Those who studied the heavens knew that stars were not scattered by accident. Patterns were written long before names were given to them. The ancients carved these alignments into stone temples, desert markers, and mountaintop observatories, but what startled the men of 1947 was the revelation that a single human body bore the same pattern in its skin. Flesh echoing cosmos, blood carrying the memory of galaxies. The whispers grew darker. If the heavens inscribed their design upon human form, then whoever bore it was not ordinary. They would be a living bridge between Earth and the stars, between mortality and the unseen. Such a thought was not welcomed in smoky military halls or scientific labs. It meant that the human story was not separate from the cosmic one. It was central. The mark's geometry was compared against maps of constellations, and every attempt revealed new alignments. A line here matched Orion's belt. another the curve of the Pleiades, another the hidden arc of Draco. It was as if the universe had signed its name upon human flesh, as if destiny itself had been branded not with ink, but with starlight. Yet with every discovery came a deeper unease. For the stars are not silent. They move with rhythm, with cycles that whisper of times appointed. If this mark was written in their language, then it also carried a timing, a season when the bearer would rise, a moment when flesh and cosmos would converge. The desert wind still carried the memory of that summer night in 1947, when something fell from the sky near Roswell. Newspapers printed confusion. Officials spoke in half-truths. But behind the curtain, another truth was carried in silence. What was recovered was not only wreckage of metal strange to human hands, but fragments inscribed with symbols that echoed the geometry hidden in the presidential dossier. Those who touched the pieces felt an unease they could not explain. Scientists spoke of alloys unknown, of markings etched with precision beyond earthly tools, but it was the resemblance to the birthmark design that froze their words. The same arcs, the same alignment of curves and points, etched upon wreckage and flesh alike. It was as if the cosmos itself had whispered the same language into the heavens, into earth, and into the skin of one yet unborn. The fragments were hidden away, guarded in crates, transported to bases where the halls were lined with silence. Yet the secret followed them, humming in the minds of those who had seen too much. One of the men, weary from the burden, remembered the words of Yeshua, "There is nothing hidden that will not be disclosed, and nothing concealed that will not be brought to light." He muttered it under his breath, not as faith, but as fear. For the truth could not be buried forever. The symbols seemed alive, appearing in dreams, searing themselves into memory. Soldiers woke with visions of stars unraveling. Engineers sketched the mark without meaning to, their hands compelled by something beyond them. A few whispered of prophecy, of a time when heaven would inscribe its will upon earth, not through fire, but through chosen flesh. The officials grew desperate to separate the Roswell fragments from the dossier's pattern, yet the two were bound. Each confirmed the other, as if one was a shadow and the other the flame. To acknowledge the connection meant admitting that destiny itself had broken into their world, leaving evidence they could neither deny nor explain. Still, the crates remained sealed, the files redacted, the witnesses silenced. But secrets are seeds, and seeds do not die in darkness. They wait for the appointed hour to break through. The birthmark was more than a symbol. It carried a presence. Those who had seen its design in the dossier spoke of an unease that lingered long after the folder was closed. It was as if the image itself breathed, whispering in silence, carrying a fire that burned without flame. They called it the seal, not with their lips in public, but in private, when their voices trembled under its weight. The seal was not merely ink upon flesh. It was alive, pulsing in rhythm with something ancient, something beyond blood. A few dared to test its shape against instruments of science, tracing the curves, measuring the ratios. They found mathematics woven into it, golden proportions repeating like echoes of creation itself. But mathematics could not explain why their hearts quickened, why dreams came upon them after studying it, dreams of light, of fire, of voices speaking from the edges of time. Some spoke of the seal as a mark of warning, others as a sign of chosen destiny. Its whisper was heard differently by each who encountered it, yet all agreed it was not silent. It was like a flame hidden beneath skin, awaiting breath to fan it into full fire. The dossier did not explain how such a mark appeared, nor who had first traced it, only that its presence was undeniable. In hidden rooms, officials debated its meaning. Could it be weaponized? Could it be erased? They spoke of surgery, of fire, of erasure by chemical means. Yet even the idea of removing it filled the air with dread, as though touching it wrongly would awaken something far more dangerous than leaving it be. The whispers grew louder. It was said that the seal was not only a birthmark, but a covenant, a signature of something eternal, binding itself to human form. The fire it carried was not one that consumed, but one that revealed. And those who brushed too close to its truth found their own shadows, exposed in ways they could not bear. The seal was unlike any other sign, because it did not belong to one age alone. Those who studied its curves began to see what terrified them most. It was not bound to a moment, but stretched across centuries, echoing the pulse of eternity itself. The birthmark carried within it the memory of ancient prophecies, as though time itself had left fingerprints upon human flesh. In dim chambers of scholars, voices whispered connections between the seal and sacred texts. They spoke of the prophets who declared that signs would be written not only in heaven, but upon the flesh of the chosen. They recalled how Yeshua, walking among men, once healed the blind by touching the dust of the earth, shaping vision out of clay. The seal felt like that same act, heaven's hand pressing upon dust, leaving behind a living pattern that could not be erased. Some said the seal was a remnant of covenant, an invisible thread binding humanity back to its author. Others feared it as a summons, a call to rise at an appointed hour when powers beyond the world would clash upon it. But all knew one thing: it could not be explained by science or dismissed by skepticism. It existed, pulsing with a rhythm that matched neither heartbeat nor breath, but something older, something eternal. The president who once held the dossier had written a note, tucked secretly between the pages. It contained only a single line, scrawled in the ink of midnight exhaustion. What is sealed in flesh cannot be unsealed by men. His words revealed his fear, but also his recognition. He knew the mark was more than identity. It was destiny, carved into time itself. Generals debated it as a threat. Priests whispered of it as a sign. Agents carried its image in their pockets, some as talismans, others as burdens they wished to forget. Yet the seal remained silent, biding its moment, waiting for the one whose very skin would speak with its fire. The dossier had traveled through hands meant to bury it. Files were stamped with red ink, pages blacked out, voices silenced. Yet every attempt to erase the design failed. Agents tasked with destruction returned shaken, their eyes carrying shadows they could not explain. They burned copies, but the image surfaced again, reappearing in places no one had stored it. They shredded photographs, yet the outlines of the seal bled through, faint but undeniable, as if the paper itself remembered. One team was dispatched to find the child said to bear the mark. They were told to erase, to silence, to remove what destiny had sealed. But when they drew close, they faltered. Some claimed their hands grew heavy, their weapons trembling with a force they did not understand. Others said dreams plagued them before their mission, warning them of fire that would consume those who touched what was sacred. A few never returned, vanishing without trace, as if swallowed by the very mystery they sought to erase. Reports surfaced of strange occurrences surrounding the mark. Cameras malfunctioned when aimed toward it. Recorders played back only static when whispers were spoken about it. One agent confessed before resigning that the seal seemed to guard itself. "It does not need protection," he muttered. "It already carries its own defense." His words were dismissed, yet the unease lingered in every corridor where the dossier was kept. The more they tried to erase it, the louder it seemed to speak. The seal was not silence. It was persistence. And persistence is a language governments cannot endure. Those who carried the memory of it found their lives unraveling. Some sank into madness, others into fear, but all knew the truth. The seal could not be erased, because it was not written by men. It became clear that the child, though hidden, was beyond their reach. Attempts to erase only proved the opposite, that destiny cannot be undone by force. The agents learned this truth not through philosophy, but through failure, through shadows that pursued them when they thought their mission finished. Behind the facades of governments and the noise of public life, there was another assembly. One never sworn into office, never named in newspapers, yet older than the institutions that claimed authority. They were known only by whispers. A council that traced patterns through history. A brotherhood bound not by nation, but by knowledge. For generations they had watched the seal, guarding fragments of it long before the 1947 dossier ever reached the president's desk. They met in vaulted chambers, hidden beneath stone cathedrals and mountain halls, where echoes carried no sound to the surface. Their archives stretched back to parchment, to clay tablets, to scrolls written when the world still trembled under empires long turned to dust. And in each record the same truth emerged. The seal had appeared before, not always in flesh, sometimes in visions, sometimes in fire, but always as a whisper of something beyond the control of kings. The council believed the seal was a covenant, a promise etched by the hand of eternity. They guarded it not as a relic of power, but as a thread binding heaven to earth. Some among them pointed to the words of Yeshua, "Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will never pass away." To them, the seal was one of those words, living, indestructible, carried forward through ages until it found flesh willing to bear it. Yet not all within the council agreed. Some feared it as judgment, a fire that would expose their hidden works. Others saw it as opportunity, a way to bind destiny for themselves if only they could master it. So even within the circle, meant to guard the pattern, division grew, and shadows crept into their oaths of silence. Still, they kept their watch. When the dossier surfaced in America, the council was not surprised. They knew the seal would not remain buried. They knew time itself was drawing nearer to the hour when the mark would blaze in the open. But they also knew something the governments did not. The seal had an appointed time, and no hand could rush it forward or hold it back. There were whispers long before the child ever took a breath. Midwives in distant villages told of births accompanied by lights in the sky, of infants, wrapped not only in blankets but in mystery. Among them, one story endured, the tale of a child born with the insignia upon their flesh, not painted, not carved, but present from the very first cry. A design that mirrored the dossier, the stars, and the fragments from Roswell. as if all threads converged into one fragile body. The mark was undeniable. No one could say it was accident. No doctor could dismiss it as random. It was geometry too precise, symmetry too complete. Those who saw it felt a silence fall upon them, the kind of silence that presses upon the soul when it knows it is standing before something sacred. The child grew, but the insignia grew with them, not larger in size, but deeper in presence. In certain light it seemed to glow faintly. In certain moments it pulsed as though listening to rhythms beyond the world. Elders whispered that the child carried not just blood, but covenant, not just breath, but prophecy. The council watched from afar, though never daring to approach openly. Governments searched, but the child remained hidden, shielded by those who believed the insignia was not to be studied, but to be protected. Stories say the child's dreams were not their own. They spoke of stars colliding, of voices calling, of a fire that spoke in languages never taught. And with every passing year, the insignia revealed more. Birds would still their flight when the child walked beneath them. Strangers claimed to hear music when the child entered a room. Some said their own scars tingled in its presence, as if responding to the seal etched in another's flesh. The insignia was no longer confined to a file or a whispered record. It walked the earth. Flesh carried it, time bore it forward, and silence no longer contained it. Those who feared it prepared their weapons. Those who longed for it prayed in shadows, and those who knew nothing of it would soon be caught in its rising flame. The stars began to shift into patterns long foretold, their light converging in silence as if obeying a script written before the foundations of the earth. Astronomers traced the alignments with trembling hands, realizing the heavens were bending toward a single point of revelation. The seal upon flesh, once hidden, once whispered, now burned like fire ready to be unveiled. The dossier had only been a fragment, a shadow. But this was the full flame, the living alignment of destiny itself. The child, now no longer a child, carried the mark into the age for which it had waited. The insignia pulsed with the rhythm of constellations, its geometry no longer dormant, but awakened. Witnesses spoke of seeing light radiate from skin, not with violence, but with inevitability, as though the stars themselves recognized the bearer. And every pulse was a summons, a call not just to governments or councils, but to the very souls of humanity. In secret halls, those who once tried to erase the mark now stood powerless. Their machines faltered, their weapons useless. The seal was not theirs to destroy. In cathedrals and deserts alike, others lifted their eyes, remembering the words of Yeshua, "You are the light of the world." A city set on a hill cannot be hidden. Some whispered that the seal was that city, that light, the flame rising when shadows could no longer rule. The alignment was not merely celestial, it was within time itself. Cycles converged, prophecies stirred, dreams spoke with urgency. The mark was no longer a question, but an answer. Yet answers carry weight, and this one bore the weight of eternity pressing against fragile humanity. Flames once hidden began to burn across nations, not flames of destruction, but flames of awakening. Those who carried fragments of memory began to feel them ignite. Those who opposed trembled, for every move against it only hastened its revelation. The seal could no longer wait. The alignment demanded fulfillment.